Hello, and welcome to the 2026-2027 school year for Ann Arbor Public Schools. You are doing this volunteer orientation because you have chosen to volunteer at Ann Arbor Public Schools. Whether this is your first year volunteering or you volunteered for many years, I'm hoping that this orientation will give you a nice, firm foundation on which to grow and blossom as a volunteer. So I really want to again welcome you and so excited for you to be here. We're going to cover a bunch of stuff today that you're probably going to enjoy. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk a little bit about Ann Arbor Public Schools, your role as a volunteer, how you can recognize and report abuse, how to have success with your AAPS contact, some great ways for you to prepare for your placement, some behavior strategies for students, and then we will let you know what your next steps are. So sit back, relax. If you want to take notes, do that. But I want you to be as engaged as possible because this information is really going to be helpful for you. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Ann Arbor Public Schools. Who is this person talking to you on this video? Well, my name is Nancy Shore, and I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Community Engagement for Ann Arbor Public Schools. And I'm here to welcome all of our lovely Strategic Partnership volunteers into our classes. And I am also an Ann Arbor Public Schools parent of two students, and I've been in this community for over 20 years. So I've got great places that I'm sitting and hats that I'm wearing all the time. And so I'm always here to answer questions, but my hope is that I can give you a warm handoff to your AAPS contact or teacher, and then they can give you everything you need to continue to be successful. Next, I want to share a little bit about Ann Arbor Public Schools because I want to make sure if you've never been in this community, you have a little bit better understanding of what we're about. So here is a slide that shares a little bit of our enrollment information, and this is from fall of 2025. And as you look at that, I want you to think a little bit about what are some things that might jump out at you and what is surprising about some of these statistics that you see here. What I would say is that many people don't realize that we have so many students that are impacted by poverty in our schools. Ann Arbor is seen as an affluent community, and so it's really surprising to people. But what I would also say is that we're all very economically diverse. And so in one classroom, you may have a student whose parent is a professor at University of Michigan. You also may have a student whose parent works in janitorial custodial services at Michigan Medicine. So you might have a real wide variety of different students in the classroom. And that's also going to be true for students who may have disabilities, students who may speak a language other than English. We actually have the most languages spoken at Ann Arbor Public Schools as any district in the entire state of Michigan. So we're very diverse in terms of languages. And so because most classrooms are around 25 to 30 kids, it's very possible that you are going to encounter a kid that's going to have any of these identities or going to have a variety of them mixed together. So just really be aware that you're not going to have kids that are all going to be the same. And that's going to maybe impact how some kids are learning, how some kids are feeling in the classroom. And so if you want to learn even more about Ann Arbor Public Schools, there's some great things you can do. First, you can go onto our website. So that's the main page, a2schools.org. Every school has its own web page. So you can find information about them. You can find out about who the principal is. You can read up on their calendar. We also are on social media. So if that's your thing, you're free to check us out there. And then finally, what's really cool is that we also have a news website that has articles and videos and information about our students and our schools and our teachers. So you can check that out and you might learn a lot more. They have a lot of profiles of teachers. So maybe your teacher is one of those teachers that have been profiled, and then you can learn even more about that person. So something else that I'm sure that you would be very interested in knowing because you do not want to show up when schools are closed is how do you find out if there's a snow day, if there's a day off? Well, there's a couple things you can do. First thing is that we do have a calendar on our website. And so you can go to a2schools.org/calendar, and that's going to show you all of the early release days, our breaks, our days off. So you can become very familiar with that. And then if there is a snow day or a closure because maybe there's another weather event, maybe there is something that happens with the power, You can go on social media, you can check our website. You may also get a phone call or a text or an email notification. So it really depends on the kinds of permissions that you have that you've signed off on the Better Impact site. But you can definitely go and check if you're unsure. This is also very true for ICE days. We get more of those now than we used to, so check out that information. In addition to some of those weather-related events, there may be an emergency at a school. And so, what is your role if there is an emergency and you're impacted? Maybe it is something, at one point, we had a situation where there were some bank robbers in the community. And so, we wanted to keep our children safe, or a student is having a medical emergency. How can you behave? Well, there's a couple things you can do. Of course, of course, of course, you always want to remain as calm as possible. You want to be able to assist the teacher in whatever way that they need help. And so, one of the things that you can also do when you're in our classrooms is you can go into there's a sign in all classrooms that talks about what to do in different emergency situations. And that'll tell you what the students should do and what the adults should do. So, you can check that out. We're really encourage you, please do not post anything on social media because you might not know the whole story of what's happened. We don't want some incorrect information to get out there. So some key takeaways as you learn about Ann Arbor Public Schools. We've got a really interesting and diverse student body. So that is going to impact your experience because you're going to be encountering all kinds of kids in your classrooms. If there's an emergency, your first and foremost task is to remain calm. You can go on to the volunteer guide and it's going to show you a lot more information about some of the details of that. And then, of course, if schools are closed, you want to go onto our website. You want to check out that calendar so you can know what's going on with their schools. So great. We've learned all about Ann Arbor Public Schools. You can check that off your list. So now I want to get a little bit more into your role as a volunteer. So when we think about a volunteer at Ann Arbor Public Schools, we really want you to think about being a positive adult role model. And when you think about the words positive adult role model, what might come to mind for you? I'm hoping that you're thinking about things like trusting, good listener, coach, encouraging, because those are all the things that we're hoping that you do when you're in our schools. A great way to be that positive adult role model and your first task as a volunteer is to really get to know students. And there's lots of ways that you can get to know students. So let's think about them. So of course you want to know students' names and how to pronounce them correctly. You want to think about students' interests. What's on their backpack? What kind of music do they like? What do they like to do in their spare time? That will really help you get to know them. And then you can also share information about yourself. What do you like to do for fun? What kind of music do you like? That will create some cool connections. You want to understand what are some things that that student may need to be successful. So this is a great question for a teacher to really understand, okay, maybe this student needs somebody to sit beside them while they're in circle time so that that can help keep that student a little bit more calm. Or maybe you can help that student with repeating and giving them extra practice in reading. We, of course, want to know a student's culture. So as we said, very diverse student body. So you might want to ask them, what's your family like? Where did you grow up? What are some things that you like to do for fun? What are some holidays you celebrate? So that just might give you a better understanding of that student's culture. And then, of course, you want to understand what are some things that that student is really good at, is really excelling at, and how can you build on that? So let's say a student is really excited about physical activity. How can you use that when maybe you're working with them in a circle? Maybe they can do a couple of jumping jacks, and that'll be exciting for them. Maybe they're really into Minecraft or into video games. How can you incorporate that when you're talking to the student about something to get them really excited about a subject you're working on? We also really want you to think about being a model to students. What does it mean to be a model? Well, we're definitely not talking about getting on your best outfit and walking the catwalk. That is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about showing students what it's like to be a successful adult and a successful human. So that may be how you hold your body, the way you show up in the classroom, When the teacher's talking, how you're putting yourself can help the students see what you're modeling. You can also maybe show them, here's how we do this activity, and then they can see it as well. So modeling is a really important aspect of being a volunteer. You should definitely be aware that one of the things that is very important about being a volunteer at our schools is that these are all pretty much minors, right? So they all have a parent and or a family member who did not give consent to have any information about a student shared outside of a classroom, right? And so when you're in our classrooms, you're going to hear a lot of stuff, right? The hope is you're connecting with the student. They're telling you their birthday. They're telling you something crazy that happened at school, at home the other day. That's fine. You can take in all that information to help support that student, but none of that goes outside of the classroom. Not the student's name, not where they live, not anything about their family situation or their educational situation. All of that needs to stay within the classroom. So it's really important as well if you are in a course or class where you are writing papers. Everything has to be anonymous in terms of names. You're not posting anything on social media. And then this is also really about boundaries because we're thinking about you more as a coach than a friend. You're not there to go to somebody's house. You're not there to hang out with them on social media or send them texts. You need to create boundaries so that there is an understanding of who you are, especially because most of you are not going to be around for that long. And so we don't want to create an overpromise of the relationship that a student's going to have with you. For your safety, one of the things that we ask is that you are never alone with the student. And that really is because if something were to happen and it's just you and that other student and no other witnesses, then you could really get in trouble for something that you didn't do. So this means no taking students to the classroom, to the bathroom by themselves, no being in a room with a closed door with just one student. You always want to be around multiple students. You want to be in highly visible spaces because then it will be easier to make sure that nothing happens that would be disconcerting. So what is your role in our key takeaways? Always, always, always the most important thing is establishing that relationship and then modeling appropriate behavior to students, making sure that anything a student says in the classroom is not shared in any other context. And then also that you're never alone for a student to be successful and safe. And if you don't feel comfortable doing something or you're put in a position, just don't do it. So great. Now you're learning a little bit more about your expectations as a volunteer. The next thing I want to talk to you about is something that I'm hoping that you don't encounter, which is recognizing and reporting child abuse. So let's talk a little bit about what the textbook definition of child abuse is. And so this is harm or threatened harm to a child's health or welfare. And this is going to be something that is not accidental, it's intentional, it's to a child, and it's going to be by somebody who is responsible for that child's health and welfare. So those are the key points to think about when you think about what child abuse may be. And really, a big part of your observational skills as a volunteer is seeing if anything seems amiss. Does a kid have a bruise that just showed up and seems out of character? Is a kid acting very differently? Is a kid saying something that you think is a little inappropriate or out of line? Did they reveal something to you that makes you worry that maybe there's something going on at home or in another context that you need to say something about? Just understand some of these signs, and a lot of them are again, if you get to know students, it may be something that you would see that you would just feel a little bit uneasy about. On the flip side, there are some things that you also might observe that are not considered child abuse. Those might be physical attributes, maybe head lice, maybe the unkept appearance. That's not child abuse necessarily. Being in poverty is not child abuse. So some parents, they are trying the best they can. And so that does not consider child abuse, while it may be challenging. Similarly with educational concerns, if there are things that are happening and the kid isn't able to focus, that's really hard, but that's not necessarily abuse. And then sibling on sibling abuse is also not considered child abuse. So these are just some things to keep in mind. Again, you can talk to your contact if you notice any of these things, because they still might be something that you want to deal with, but they're not considered child abuse. So if you do see something that is concerning to you, you are not necessarily a mandated reporter, which means that you do not have to report to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services yourself. The best thing that we would highly encourage you to do is to tell your contact what you're observing. And a big reason for that is one, you may not know the whole story of what's going on, and it's very likely that that other person is. And two, you may not want to get involved in an ongoing situation because you have reported something or because you have done that. But if you do feel like I reported this, I don't feel like anything's happening, you can go on to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services website and you can report the incident. The report's going to be confidential. Nobody's going to know that you did it. So you certainly can do that. But also, even if you see something, you reported it, do not share anything with anybody else because again, you don't know what's going on. You wouldn't want your dirty laundry aired to other people, so you want to keep it confidential. So as we look at some of the key takeaways from recognizing and reporting abuse, you want to know the signs, some of the red flags that we talked about. You want to say something, please, even if you're not sure, just say something. It's not going to hurt to tell the teacher, I noticed this. Another thing to think about, especially if the kid is older, is you can also approach the kid and say, hey, I'm noticing something. I'm noticing that, every time you come in, you've got some bruises on your neck. And I'm really concerned. I really want to make sure that you're safe. So do you want to say something to the teacher or do you want me to say something? So that's another strategy that you can use is you don't necessarily even have to say something. You can talk to the student about saying something themselves. And then in any of these cases, make sure that you're not sharing anything in public. You're talking just one-on-one with the teacher, so that you're not sharing this information with other people. So in addition to really establishing a strong relationship with the students that you're going to be volunteering with, we want to make sure that you're also successful with the teacher that you're working with. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can be successful with your Ann Arbor Public Schools contact. So as many of you probably know and watched, we did have the World Cup this year. And so when I want you to think about your role and your relationship with your teacher in the classroom, really think about it as your AAPS contact is kind of like the captain of the team. And when the captain is there, the captain is directing, the captain is calling some plays, the captain is encouraging. So you as a team member, you are looking to the captain to give you some direction. At the same time, team members are not just passive, right? Not everybody else on that soccer team, if they were not out there doing their jobs, then it would not be a World Cup winning soccer team, right? So you as part of that team need to be ready, prepared. You need to get out there and say to the contact, what can I do? How can I help? Because we do hear from teachers sometimes that the worst thing in some ways is for a volunteer to hold back and not even just ask how they can help. And at the very least, just be there and engage with the students, asking them questions, building those relationships. That's going to take you a long way. Another thing that we often hear from our staff are the challenge that they get from volunteers. So if you were to think about or ask a teacher, what is the biggest challenge you have with the volunteers that you work with? What do you think that they would say? Well, the biggest issue is lack of communication. And we do not want you to be the Darth Vader of communication. We do not want you to go on the dark side and ghost and flake and not share if you're going to be late, if you're sick, if you too much life got in your way and you can't volunteer. We want you to be a communication Jedi and communicate early, often, make sure that your contact knows what's going on with you. And that's just going to go a long way to keeping that relationship solid. A great tool that you can use for communication is this volunteer educator agreement. You will be getting a link to that when you're connected to a teacher And that will allow you to establish expectations when you're going to be late, when you're on break, how you want to communicate together. So definitely encourage you to complete that if it makes sense in the context of the volunteering that you're doing. So how can you set yourself up for success with your volunteer? Your teacher, be part of the team, communicate, 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 and do that agreement if it makes sense to do so. Awesome. Let's keep going. So you have gotten placed. You're so excited. You've signed up. It's going to be your first day. How do you get ready to go? Let us think about this just like you're preparing for a job or you're preparing for a class. What are some things that you might want to do to be prepared? Of course, you want to do that research, right? You can go on the website. You can check out the volunteer guide. You're looking at this video. You're already getting there, right? You're seeing the things that you need to do to get yourself up to speed. You want to use our Better Impact site to make sure that you're getting your placement chosen. If you need to log hours, you're doing that there, working on that agreement with your contact, and then having the responsibility to be communicative, to be a team member, to really be as proactive as possible. Just touching a little bit on Better Impact, you have already gone there to sign up to be a volunteer, to go through your orientation. And so the page is just there to help you if you want to choose your placement, that's going to happen on that site. There's going to be some news and resources that you can access. And then if you need to log hours, that's going to be where you do it. So everything has gone great. You are excited about your first day. What do you do when you get to that building? First of all, please, please, please give yourself a little bit more time. It's better to be early than to be way late, especially if you've only got a limited amount of time to volunteer. So give yourself a little extra time, figure out where you need to go, get to the main entrance of the building. And you want to talk to them when you get there. Say, hey, my name is Nancy. I'm volunteering with Mr. Smith, and I'm really excited. May I please come in? And then they will open the door. You'll go into that main office and you're going to get a visitor's badge. Please bring a photo ID because they're going to need to check that as well. And then you'll be ready to go. So how can you prepare for your placement? We've got some awesome tools for you to use. We have an agreement that you can do with your contact, and also, of course, be ready to roll on that first day. Wow, we're almost done. The next thing we want to talk about is just give you a couple of hints and tips for how to work with students in the classroom, because inevitably there's going to be some drama and you want to be a little bit prepared, right? So here's a couple student behavior strategies. First of all, we are often asked by our volunteers, like, what should I do if a student is acting a little bit upset, runs out of the room, is sad? Well, really, your role is to rely on the teacher. You are not responsible for student behavior. That is not one of the things that we're asking you to do, especially if you're really new to schools and really new to this classroom. So you really want to ask that teacher, what do these students need in order to help them be successful? So speaking of needs, all of us as humans, we have essential needs that need to be fulfilled, right? So there's all kinds of needs. We want to belong. We want to feel safe. We really want to be happy, understood, succeed, have our sensory needs met. So that's pretty much every person, right? You can think about when you have all these needs met, you're super happy. Well, here's the reality. What happens when we don't get our needs met? So what happens if you don't get enough sleep? You may be really grumpy in a classroom. What happens if maybe you're having some relationship issues, right? Then you might not feel good. What happens if you're in a new environment where everybody knows each other and you're there just by yourself, right? And nobody knows you. There's going to be some potential behaviors that are going to surface. And so that's exactly what's happening in our classrooms. If you see a student who is acting a certain way, it's very likely that something has happened to them that is impacting them and making it hard for them to be present and successful. And so you really want to think about those needs. If you do encounter a student that has big emotions, here's just a couple of key pointers from some of our social workers just to help you be ready. So the biggest thing, just like an emergency, please stay calm. Being well regulated is going to help the student regulate. You want to be able to get that student down from that red zone because students who are super agitated are not going to be able to respond to anything. They need to calm down. So please let them do that. There's no need to shame any student in public because, again, we don't know what's going on in their home lives. Their parents could be having a divorce, a parent could be in the hospital, a sibling could have died. We don't know. And so please, please, please don't say something disparaging to a particular student in front of their peers. And then a really big thing that you can continue to do and work on with the teacher is we always want to validate there's nothing wrong with being upset, right? Sometimes the behavior that comes with that feeling is hard, right? If you're angry and you throw a pencil, we don't really want you to throw a pencil, but you can be angry. We just want to talk about what are some other ways that you can manage or work with that anger so that it isn't going to be destructive, right? And so that's a great thing that you can talk to your teacher about is how can I help this student build some of the skills that they may be working on. One more hint and tip I want to give you is really about the type of language you can use in the classroom. And there's some language you might be wondering, what if a student is doing really well? How can I encourage them? How can I redirect students if they're not doing what they're supposed to do? Here's a couple of tools in your toolbox to make that a little easier. So first of all, we have reinforcing language, and this is language you can do to help praise or really honor when a student is successful. And so what's the best type of reinforcing language to use? It's very concrete. So instead of saying, wow, great job, you can say, wow, you were really struggling with those 3 questions on that math test, and then you got them right. How does that feel? So you really want to help students think about their behavior. You don't want to hold up as one student as example. Again, not knowing all students are at different levels. So we don't necessarily want to say, well, Sarah is doing amazing. Like, why can't you be as good as her? Like, that is not the way to do it. And we want to build on strengths, right? So, you were really struggling with that math problem. So what strategies did you use to be successful? And then they might say, well, I took a break. I looked back at the question and I read it again. And so that helps for them to reinforce how they can be successful. Another type of language that you can use with students is reminding. And so this is when a student is not doing what has been asked of them. So let's say it's time to go to recess and there's a student that's still sitting there. Let's say it's time to go on to the next activity and a student is not listening or paying attention. What you can do is that, first of all, a student has probably heard or probably knows what they need to do. And so you can say to them, what do you need to be doing right now? And so you can help them do that. Something else is really helpful is like, show me what it looks like to be ready to go outside. And so then that would help a student remember and be as brief as you can, and try not to add attitude into be like, oh my God, please get ready to go outside. Because that's just going to make it harder because now you've put some attitude into it, right? Finally is redirecting language. So this is a little bit firmer type of language that you can use if a student is doing what not doing what needs to be done. You've given them as much redirection or you've given them as much reminding as possible. And now you want to be like, here's what you need to do. And so the best way to do that is to be very direct and specific. No questions here. This is not a time to be encouraging and coaching. This is just saying, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. Pick up the book. When you have your shoes on, we'll go outside. So you just be as clear as possible and then just zip it. And that's hard, right? I know it's hard for me, but leaving you with a time for them to be able to act on the behavior. So what are some key takeaways? Needs. So what a student need? How can you help fulfill that need? How can you help that student be successful? Remain calm if a student is upset. Please ask the teacher to get some help if you're not sure what to do. And then you can get this slide deck on Better Impact or when we email you the volunteer guide, and you can look at these word stems again and maybe practice those as well. So, oh my gosh, you're almost done with this orientation, and we're going to send you out the door with your next steps. One of the things that you can do is you go into Better Impact and you're going to check your badges. And all you're going to need to have is we're going to do a background check. And once you're done with this orientation and you take the quiz, you'll have this orientation complete badge. Once you get those two, you will get an email and it will tell you, hey, it's either time for you to choose your placement or you're all set. And then your coordinator will tell you when you get to start your placement. The process typically is that you complete the application, which is what you've been doing, and then you're going to get this orientation done. You're going to get placed, and then you will typically get an email introduction between you and whomever is your main supervisor or contact at the schools. And then you and that person need to work out details in terms of schedule, in terms of first day, and so that you'll be ready to go. And our goal is that once you finish this onboarding, you are out the door into a school within 2 weeks. So what are your next steps? Finish the onboarding, which means after this video, do that quiz, look through the volunteer guide, get yourself placed and start your experience. So now, right after this video, you can go on to the Better Impact site and you're going to take the quiz. You need to get at least 50% of the questions right. Once you do, as I said, you'll get that badge and you will be ready to go. So I am so excited to have you volunteer at Ann Arbor Public Schools. I hope you have a great time and I look forward to maybe seeing you out there in the world. Have a great day and take that quiz.